Testing. Great. Well, welcome everybody. I think we'll go ahead and get going. It's the top of the hour and you all are so prompt and wonderful to be here on time. So good afternoon and welcome to our distinguished guests and colleagues. Thank you for joining us here in person as well as online. Sovereign Global Solutions is very pleased to be hosting Protecting Armenia's Sovereignty, Identity, and Heritage on behalf of the National Democratic Alliance of Armenia, the pro-Western, pro-democracy political movement promoting human rights, religious freedom, and sound governance in Armenia. We are joined remotely by the team in Yerevan, including our friend and supporter, Dr. David Grigorian, a World Bank economist, Harvard scholar, and an Armenian expert who helps us with all the questions that we have. NDA's top priority is to deepen the relationship between the United States and Armenia, to make that relationship as solid as possible. So with that in mind, we hold this briefing today because of that. Over the last year, we've witnessed the repression and persecution of Armenia's Apostolic Holy Church and all the dissenting voices. The authoritarian policies of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan have led to the erosion of the rule of law, a corrupted judiciary, a bloated and abusive prison system, and a KGB-like security apparatus, which has jailed clergy, businessmen, journalists, and any opposing politicians. Our experts today will share and explain the impact of recent developments that we ask and hope that U.S. policymakers will consider or take into consideration, especially in light of the upcoming June elections. Joining us today are world-renowned experts and authorities on religious freedom and democracy. You will hear from Dr. Jan Figel, former Special Envoy of the European Union for the Promotion of Religion or Belief and current President of Forum for Religious Freedom, Europe. Dr. John Eibner of Christian Solidarity International, who recently visited the Armenian Apostolic Archbishop Bagrat Galstanyan in jail, and former Ambassador Alberto Miguel Fernandez of Middle East Media Research Institute. We are going to begin with Dr. John Eibner, our first speaker. As I said, he's the president of Christian Solidarity International, and for over 3 decades, he has directed the field-based research and human rights advocacy campaigns on behalf of endangered religious communities in Sudan, Nigeria, the South Caucasus, and the broader Middle East. He is the co-author, together with the Baroness Cox, of Ethnic Cleansing in Progress, War in Nagorno-Karabakh. Dr. Eibner will present today on The Persecution is Not Peace, U.S. Policy and the War Against the Armenian Apostolic Church. Dr. Eibner.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. It's great to be here. Thank you for coming for my State of Armenia address. It probably will not be as entertaining as the State of the Union address, but hopefully it will be no less informative. As was mentioned by Jacqueline, I was in Armenia earlier this month with my CSI colleague, Dr. Joel Veldkamp. It was just a few days before the visit of Vice President Vance to Armenia and Azerbaijan. At the top of our agenda was a visit to Yerevan's high-security Kentron prison. Now, why a prison visit? Here's the backstory. We had been in Yerevan last November for what was billed as the inaugural Republic of Armenia prayer breakfast, with the support and participation of the Honorable Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. The Prime Minister was indeed the star of the show and thrilled a good many of the Christian foreign visitors who marveled at his recitation of Bible verses. We had hoped at that time to visit an incarcerated Armenian Apostolic hierarch, that's Archbishop Bagrat Galstanyan. The Bible-citing Prime Minister had him arrested and imprisoned last June. on trumped-up charges of terrorism and conspiracy to overthrow the government. But we were not able to get the necessary permission at that time. However, 3 months later, arrangements had been made by the great team of dedicated pro bono lawyers at the Armenian Center for Political Rights. They had already superbly documented the prosecution's fabrication of evidence against the Archbishop. So off we went again to Yerevan. In a small plain prison meeting room, the gray-bearded, lively-eyed, and cassocked Archbishop cut a larger-than-life figure. He assured us it was a great privilege to be incarcerated because of his efforts to be faithful to Christ, faithful to his church, and faithful to his nation, especially at a time when that Christian nation and its civilization faces an existential threat. Archbishop Bagrat believes it providential that he should now be an inmate at the Kentrol prison, where the Armenian KGB executed his episcopal namesake and role model during Stalin's Great Purge of 1937. That was Archbishop Bagrat Vardazarian. This martyr of the church had also been falsely charged with plotting to overthrow the government. Only 2 years before our prison visit, the charismatic Archbishop Bagrat was leading tens of thousands on a 90-mile peaceful march from his see in Tavush to the capital, Yerevan. This was his Palm Sunday moment. He became the focal point for the so-called Holy Struggle movement that challenges what Prime Minister Pashinyan calls his ideology of the real Armenia. Pashinyan's new ideology calls for radical policies that weaken the fabric of the historic Armenian nation. For example, 1, acceptance of Azerbaijan's ethno-religious cleansing of Armenian Christians from Nagorno-Karabakh, and the political and legal closure of all issues related to this mass atrocity crime. 2, the arbitrary handing over of Armenian borderland to Azerbaijan. 3, the alteration of the Armenian constitution in accordance with the ideology of real Armenia. 4, the winding down of the Armenian government's support for international recognition of the Armenian genocide. And lastly, 5, seizing control of the Armenian Apostolic Church and transforming it into a servant of the state. Archbishop Bagrat has long seen the ideology of real Armenia as nothing more than appeasement in the hope of satisfying Turkey's and Azerbaijan's harsh conditions for accepting Pashinyan's submission to their authority. Azerbaijan, backed by Islamist Turkey and Syrian jihadists, defeated Armenia in the 2020 war for Nagorno-Karabakh. 3 years later came the unchallenged ethno-religious cleansing of Armenian Christians from Karabakh. Now this constellation of Islamic powers, which has recently been joined by Pakistan, has its sights set on the destruction of the Republic of Armenia itself. That is to say, the Republic as a secure homeland for the victims of the Armenian genocide and subsequent anti-Armenian mass atrocity crimes, including their descendants. Azerbaijan's dictator, Aliyev, has been most clear in public about the end game. He has openly and repeatedly boasted that this territory will be reclaimed, what he calls Western Azerbaijan will be reclaimed and resettled by Azeri Turkish Muslims, preferably by peaceful means, but if not, by war if necessary. Should the real Armenia project continue unchecked, it's not only conceivable, but it is very likely within a generation, Armenian Christians will be a minority in Armenia. Without political agency, living mainly in diminishing in an Armenian quarter in Yerevan, much like what one finds in Aleppo and in Jerusalem. Pashinyan's real Armenia, that is to say, Aliyev's Western Azerbaijan, is the Turkish-Azerbaijani solution for solving the historic Armenian question that the great Armenian genocide of 1915 failed to settle. In this struggle, fewer than 3 million Armenian Christians are faced by a so-called one nation, two state Turkish-Azerbaijani condominium with a total population of nearly 100 million and enormous economic and military might. Turkey's colony, the jihadist-led Syria and Pakistan, now of course a nuclear state, are now in the mix. Pashinyan's greatest challenge in coming to terms with Turkey and Azerbaijan lies in seizing control of the church. It's difficult for most Americans to begin to appreciate the crucial role played by this church in the survival of the Armenian nation. It has served for centuries as the most solid institutional bastion of Armenian nationhood and of Christian witness amongst Armenians. It is designed to exclude external interference in its internal affairs. As such, it has withstood centuries of severe persecution by the Ottoman Caliphate, including the Great Armenian Genocide, which was conducted in the context of an openly declared jihad and which was extended into the Caucasus. Armenia's national church also survived the violent efforts of the atheistic Soviet authorities to eradicate it. This also survived the ethno-religious cleansing of Karabakh, maintaining in exile the region's persecuted diocese. Because of the spiritual and institutional strength of the Armenian Apostolic Church, it has not been enough for Pashinyan to imprison only Archbishop Bagrat. He was just the first of more than a dozen prominent clerics who have been placed behind bars, consigned to house arrest, or indicted on a slew of unsubstantiated charges, including terrorism, coup plotting, obstruction of justice, and even planting drugs. Pashinyan has also imprisoned the wealthiest lay patron of the church, Samuel Karapetyan, and has had his businesses nationalized after the fashion of the Soviets. Among those now indicted for obstructing justice is the head of the Armenian Apostolic Church, the Catholicos of all Armenians, Karakin II. Pashinyan's success depends on achieving the overthrow of the Catholicos. This is crucial for his political survival. It should not be overlooked that the persecuted Armenian Apostolic Church is also an American church with 2 archdioceses and over 500,000 adherents here in the United States. The Catholicos is a legitimate spiritual leader of these American Christians too. Azerbaijan and Turkey have identified the Catholicos and the church he leads as an obstacle to peace. Pashinyan therefore publicly declared that his ouster is an unconditional goal. In doing so, he accuses the Catholicos of being a national security threat, of reporting daily to a foreign agent, and so on. Pashinyan has gone a step further by donning garb that appears to be a cassock and placing himself at the head of an uncanonical committee to direct reform in the church. The Bolsheviks did something of the sort in the 1920s. They raised up, financed, and otherwise promoted an uncanonical so-called free church movement to challenge the authority of the legitimate Catholicos and other church leaders. That effort failed to produce the promised reform and spiritual revival. It was instead just a prelude to the violent purge that produced the execution not only of Archbishop Bagrat's namesake, but also the murder of the then Catholicos Koran I 1 year later. It must be clear that the bloody religious persecution of the communist era was often committed by Armenians who served the interest of Moscow. Today, as Armenia is moving out of the Russian sphere of influence and into that of the Turkish-Azerbaijani condominium, there are likewise Armenians who will gravitate towards political power and serve the anti-Armenian and anti-Christian interests of Ankara and Baku. Before saying farewell to us, Archbishop Bagrat asked us to deliver a letter to Vice President Vance. He found some common ground with the Vice President, whose professed Catholicism is widely known. The Archbishop wrote, You, Mr. Vice President, have rightly warned that the EU has been committing civilizational suicide by giving up Europe's Christian identity and opening its borders to those who do not share the values rooted in Europe's Judeo-Christian tradition. But he also wanted the Vice President to know this is precisely what the Armenian Prime Minister is engineering in Armenia. The Archbishop might have added Vance's criticism of Europe for restricting free speech and other forms of democratic backsliding, which are now taking place in Armenia. Archbishop Bograt found further common ground with Vance. He wished the Vice President well as he works to facilitate peace between Armenia on the one hand and Azerbaijan and Turkey on the other, and to create conditions for the fulfillment of the administration's principal strategic goal in the Caucasus, that is, the Trump route for international peace and prosperity. But such a peace, the Archbishop warned, must not be based on the demise of the Armenian nation state. The Archbishop proposed that a genuine and lasting peace could be achieved if the Trump administration were to secure the following. One, the release of the Armenian Christian prisoners held in Baku, prisoners for whom Trump has already called a release. He's publicly asked for their release, and it hasn't happened yet. Two, the release of the church-related prisoners held in Yerevan. And the third is guarantees for the safe return with fundamental human rights intact of the 150,000 Armenian Christians who were forced out of their homes in Nagorno-Karabakh. Unfortunately, while in Yerevan and Baku, the Vice President failed to acknowledge Archbishop Bograt's concerns about Armenia's civilizational suicide, nor did he address publicly or secure any of the conditions the Archbishop identified as essential for sustainable peace. What the Vice President did, however, was endorse the re-election bid of the persecutor of the National Church, and to delete a tweet referencing the Armenian genocide in deference to the genocide-denying Turkish-Azerbaijani condominium. The question must arise, is it within the power of this Turkish-Azerbaijani condominium to censor the Vice President of the United States, or to impose a kind of self-censorship regime? Within days of the Vice President's visit, the Armenian Prime Minister escalated his war against the Church by having criminal charges pressed against the Catholicos and placing a travel ban on him and 6 other bishops to prevent them from attending an Episcopal conference in Austria. Wittingly or unwittingly, Vance's visit has effectively given the green light for the continuation of the persecution of the Armenian Apostolic Church. When one hears U.S. Ambassador to Turkey and Special Envoy for Syria Tom Barak promoting, without any correction from the White House, the doctrine that peace is submission, submission of the weak to the strong, and that Middle Eastern states formed after the aftermath of World War I, like Armenia and Israel, are no more than tribes with flags, with artificial borders, and were never meant to be nation states, it's reasonable to question the administration's commitment to Armenian national statehood. You have to make a distinction. It's very much committed to TRIP, no doubt about that. But there's an open question as to whether there's a commitment to Armenian national statehood. You can have TRIP without an Armenian national state. An administration that markets itself as the most Christian administration in American history and as an unprecedented protector of persecuted Christians must help defend religious liberty and those struggling to uphold civilization based on Judeo-Christian tradition. This is the expectation of most Americans. The use of coercive powers of the state to interfere in the internal affairs of churches and other faith communities is abhorrent to the American tradition of religious liberty. Few American Christians would accept such interference in their own churches. Today, CSI asks the Trump administration to show strength and conviction by defending the Armenian Apostolic Church against this persecution, and thereby enhancing the prospect of survival of the Christian civilization of what is the world's first Christian nation. As the world shows respect for President Trump's strength and leadership, the question arises, why not Turkey's Islamist Erdogan and Azerbaijan's oil-rich potentate Aliyev? CSI believes strong American leadership can be a catalyst for peace in the Caucasus without sacrificing the Armenian Apostolic Church and the Armenian nation, which is grounded in it. We hope and pray the Trump administration will meet this challenge head-on, as it is mindful of the apposite words of the prophet Jeremiah. They have treated lightly the injury to my people. Peace, peace, they say, though there is no peace. And there are great injuries that have been done to the Armenian people, genocide, massacres, and we cannot allow them to be treated lightly in the name of peace. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Eibner. We will have so much to think about by the time we are finished with today. But our next guest and speaker is Ambassador Alberto Fernandez, who's the Vice President of the Middle East Media Research Institute. He was previously president of the Middle East Broadcasting Networks, which provides news and information in Arabic to the Middle East and North Africa. He is a member of the board of directors of the Center for Cyber and Homeland Security at George Washington University. He is also a non-resident fellow in Middle East politics and media at the Trends Research and Advisory Center in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. He was a Foreign Service officer and served at the as the State Department's coordinator for the Center for Strategic Counterterrorism Communications. He also served as U.S. Ambassador to Equatorial Guinea and U.S. Chargé d'Affaires to Sudan. He held senior public diplomacy positions at the U.S. embassies in Afghanistan, Jordan, Syria, Guatemala, Kuwait, and in the department's Near East Affairs Bureau. Ambassador Fernandez was a career member of the U.S. Senior Foreign Service with the rank of Minister Counselor. He was the recipient of a 2008 Presidential Meritorious Service Award, the 2006 Edward Murrow Award for Excellence in Public Diplomacy, a 2003 Superior Honor Award for his work in Afghanistan, among many other awards. So Ambassador Fernandez will present on Authoritarian Lawfare is a Fateful Choice for Armenia. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. There's a phrase, an infamous phrase associated with the Vietnam War that journalist Peter Arnett reportedly heard from an American officer about a Vietnamese village. It became necessary to destroy the town to save it. One looks at the situation of Armenia today, and especially the campaign of against the Armenian Apostolic Church, and that infamous phrase comes to mind. What is the cost of the ostensible reasons given for what is happening against the church in Armenia? We hear about the peace question, we hear about the reform issue, we hear about the usual the hidden hand, foreign powers seeking to do things through the church against the government. These are things that we've heard often within other contexts. The reality is that the government's campaign against the Armenian Apostolic Church, which has been going on for well over a year, continues unabated to this day. My colleague just spoke about the Catholicos being forbidden from traveling to a bishop's council held in Austria, and it's significant what that council said. This was a council of the Armenian bishops worldwide. It included the archbishops in the United States, and they issued a statement, and it's a very strong statement. It was issued only a week ago. It seems to me that's something that should get a lot more attention. The meeting was held at St. Pölten in Austria, and they expressed their deep concern regarding the undesirable current state of church-state relations in Armenia. They called for an end to repression against clergy, bishops, and others, and they called upon the government to cease persecution against the church and to respect the centuries-long sovereignty and autonomy of the church. And they expressed their willingness to have full dialogue with the government, but in an environment of mutual respect and without ultimatums and without threats. That's a powerful statement given by the church bishops worldwide, except for those that may have been in the pocket of the government, the handful that did not attend. But even there, it's very interesting to note that one of the coordinators of the Austria meeting, which was the Archbishop of the Western United States, Archbishop Derderian, who had been only a month ago, only in January, had been in Yerevan meeting with the prime minister, discussing issues of reform. And yet a month later, he goes to Austria and he endorses, in fact, he's the guy that organized the statement being issued. So clearly there is a wrong being done against the Armenian Apostolic Church by the government for reasons that are sometimes said, sometimes not said. The reality is this. One of the differences between the liberal, so-called liberal democratic West and the authoritarian East is precisely the issue of state non-interference in the internal workings of religious bodies. The Prime Minister of Armenia portrays himself as pro-Western, and that's certainly a view seemingly confirmed by the stances of the European Union and recent remarks by the US Vice President in Armenia. But the actions against the church carried out by the Prime Minister and his government are akin to that seen in authoritarian regimes nearby. It is certainly precisely the way that religion is treated with the government's, Pashinyan's peace partners in Turkey and Azerbaijan. Both of them treat religion, Muslim, Christian, doesn't matter, with a heavy hand, with deep, deep control. And of course, that's precisely the way that religion was treated in the Soviet Union and is treated by Russia today. The notorious relationship between, for example, between the Putin government and the Russian Orthodox Church. And we see the same thing in China. Again, the government, the hands of the government on the church, the kind of the underground church and the regime church, which applauds everything the regime says. But Russia and China are far off, maybe not that far off. The Middle East is rife with examples of religious bodies, Christian or Muslim, submitted to state control. There are a few examples, a few exceptions. Israel's an exception. Lebanon is an exception. One might say that the Republic of Georgia is an exception. It's a place where the Georgian Orthodox Patriarch will influence the state more than the state will influence the Georgian Orthodox Patriarch. But the default position in the region is of senior churchmen and also Muslim clerics being under the thumb of the state, applauding its initiatives, staying silent in the face of anything that could possibly embarrass the regime. Such was the case of the Greek Orthodox and Syrian Orthodox patriarchates in Damascus under the brutal rule of the Assad regime. This is the bitter reality in Egypt today, where the head of the largest Middle East church, the Coptic Orthodox Pope Patriarch of Alexandria, Tawadros II, must tread carefully with regards to anything of importance he says or does with the government of Egypt and its President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And it isn't just Eastern churches that must be careful. Very recently, when the Iranian regime massacred tens of thousands of civilians in early 2026, last month, one of the silent voices was of the Roman Catholic Cardinal Archbishop of Tehran, Dominique Mathieu, a Belgian Franciscan appointed by Pope Francis in 2021. He had nothing to say, nothing at all about the slaughter in the streets of Iran. Of course, why? Because that's the nature of the regime. Much, probably in his case, worse because he's a foreigner, but that's the nature of these regimes. And even there are situations where the attempt to control maybe failed, but was attempted. Very recently, for example, we had in Iraq a government campaign against the Chaldean Catholic Patriarch, Louis I Sacco, to remove him from power. I think it was thwarted probably because of American intervention or American hinting, but the attempt was to remove him as well. In Muslim majority authoritarian regimes, the level of control and oversight can even extend down to the grassroots. The Egyptian state, for example, exercises oversight not only over fatwas issued by Muslim religious authorities, but also the weekly Friday mosque sermon across the country. Many other regimes exercise this tight control over what a Muslim prayer leader can say from the pulpit of his mosque. And that includes Turkey, that includes Iran, and that includes Azerbaijan. And Armenia is seeing, of course, a wave of creeping authoritarianism over public institutions, separate but complementary to the campaign against the Armenian Church. There's something which is so obvious. I mean, I almost hesitate to say it, but it has to be said, and that is there is a clear, direct connection between the freedom given to the church or to religious bodies and other freedoms of speech and conscience. I don't know of any situation where a regime persecutes religious bodies and then turns around and is open and accepting of secular criticism, political criticism, sarcasm, any other kind of stuff. They go together. This is the reality we've seen in the Middle East and in many other parts of the world. This is the danger, aside from the terrible damage being done to the Armenian church and to the believers in Armenia. It is a danger for the regime and for the government of Armenia itself. Going down that path is a very, very dangerous way, even beyond the campaign against the church. Regimes that don't want to hear criticism from religious authorities tend also not to want to hear criticism from the media or from secular critics. States that use the coercive power of government to bend one outside organization, like the church, to its will also inevitably use the same coercive power against others. Pashinyan, his government, they can't have it both ways. They can't say that they want to be part of the liberal West, they want to be pro-American, and basically imitate the religious standards of the Erdogan regime or Assad or, pick whatever dictator you want. There's a basic contradiction here that has to be solved and has to be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Our next esteemed speaker is Dr. Jan Figel. Dr. Figel is a critical leader throughout Europe and Slovakia. He served as Deputy Prime Minister of Slovakia, as the first ever special envoy for the promotion of freedom of religion or belief, also known as FORB, outside the EU, and since 2025, he has served as the president of Forum for Religious Freedom Europe, also called FOREF Europe. As the special envoy, Dr. Figel held a pioneering role that led several EU countries to establish a similar diplomatic position. He is intensely involved in FORB advocacy, promotion of interreligious dialogue, religious literacy, and religious social responsibility. He is an advocate for protection and release of FORB prisoners in Cuba, Iran, Pakistan, and other countries. He is a member of He's also a member of the Intergovernmental Network, the International Council of Experts of the International Religious Freedom and Belief Alliance, and since 2025, he is a visiting professor at the CEU San Pablo University in Madrid and visiting fellow at the MCC College in Budapest. He holds academic title of Doctor Honoris Causa from 5 universities in Slovakia, USA, and Romania. Please welcome Dr. Figel.
Thank you, Jacqueline and Sovereign Global Solutions. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. If I may start with a bit personal note, I'm honored to be here to speak at the Capitol Hill. I traveled from far away and I didn't expect such participation. So thank you, really. I want to say that there is something deeply moral in this interest, including the stream online to the global audiences. Evil today is so successful, so impactful, so strong, because it has many influential allies. And 3 siblings are probably the most effective for evil to grow, to spread, like weed in the garden. We do nothing and weed is growing. That's because we do nothing. Indifference is the first one. If I don't care because it's far away, what can I do? It's not me, it's not us. Indifference. Second is ignorance. If I don't know, if I don't understand what is behind, what's going on, no learning. Why for? And the third sibling, an ally of evil, is fear. If we are afraid to say something, to stand up and to defend the defenseless, the voiceless, then evil is growing. So the antidotes, of course, are engagement, education, lifelong learning, and simple but important human courage. To stand up, to say something, to write something. Thank you for all those who work with media, because through media, we can fight indifference, ignorance, and even fear. Now to the point of this briefing, which is situation in small but deeply important, historically important nation and country, Armenia. Integrity of Armenia and freedom and dignity of Armenians is under severe internal attack. They had to survive many external attacks. Now it's coming from inside. Strange, but real, and in a way, it resonates with the situation in the region, in Europe, and in the world. Especially why, and I can say it because half of my life I lived under communist regime in the Soviet camp. I have a name of my young uncle who was killed, eliminated by Stalinist secret services of Czechoslovakia, and we don't know where his body lies or found the rest. And the attacks in Armenia, I see especially the post-Soviet and post-communist way of doing politics or keeping power instead of respecting rule of law, human rights, democracy. And secondly, the impact of the ongoing war in Europe, in our civilizational space. Even the US is at war. I think you know it. You must feel it. And we are not at the end. And I don't want to speak about war in Ukraine, catastrophe, tragedy, and still can be worse, or we find a way out of this mess and tragedy in our civilizational space. So why I wanted to be personal and also global in a way, because church, Christianity, faith, in case of then Czechoslovakia, but also Poland, Hungary, many countries, represented the most decisive and victorious resilience, non-violent opponentura to the regime. Many bishops, clergy, lay people, in thousands altogether, paid the price, some the highest price, being killed, tortured, long-term imprisoned. But Christian dissent was a force for freedom, for dignity of all, for human rights, justice for all, non-violent ethics. And what we see today in Armenia against the Armenian Apostolic Church is exactly what I can speak in a long speech about story of Czechoslovak communist oppression against free people and free church. It's propaganda which speaks about service of church or clergy or hierarchy to foreign interests, or working against peace, against stability. Communists used to defamate leaders of the church, to divide clergy from lay people, divide et impera, to divide, as John Eibner said, pro-peace and the others. We had such organization, was called Pacem in Terris, according to the encyclical, and those were good guys, and the rest had problems. So division of church is the usual tactics, or better to say strategy of former communists today. Ban on travel, attacks, murders of clergy and active laymen. But to conclude this parallel, similar picture, I want to say the victory belonged to faithful leaders, faithful church, to those who resisted, but resisted actively with creative attitude. And this is also a call for the church in Armenia today. I want to underline that faith, courage, non-violent resistance, and perseverance means power of the powerless. The power of the powerless. And this is victorious power. Takes time, but it's winning. Armenia is the oldest Christian nation. This is something exceptional if we look to the numbers, to the region, to the history. And therefore, role of Armenian Apostolic Church was crucial for survival of this small nation, for its legacy, heritage, culture, identity, cohesion. These are non-material but decisive qualities for any community. If they lose it, they will lose everything. Attack on Armenian Apostolic Church is actually attack on freedom, autonomy, integrity, and constitutional independence of the church. And through that, it means attack on Christianity in Armenia and of Armenians, attack on future of this proud free nation. Few points on religious freedom. Why it is so important? Ambassador Fernando mentioned some, but I would like to add that attack on religious freedom is attack on freedom of all, because religious freedom is important for people of faith or no faith, for people from A to Z, which means from atheists up to Zoroastrians. Because religious freedom, if you look into international law conventions, is defined as freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Because each one of you, each one of us, has a triune dimension. We are homo rationalis, homo moralis, and homo spiritualis, or religiosus, in one. Everybody has his, her rationality, morality, spirituality. An attack on religious freedom is an attack on human dignity. This dimension is protected and must be protected for freedom to be applied individually and in community, at home, privately, or publicly. And then there is a role for church, for the organization, for a community. And therefore, respect to religious freedom presupposes respect to religious body, organization, authority, integrity, independence, and so on. The ideal for liberal democracy, for real democracy, for democratic state is to have sovereign state working with autonomous church or churches on promotion or implementation of justice, common good, and dignity of all. That's ideal. But reality cannot work against this ideal. It must follow this objective. And here I want to come to the conclusion that religious freedom, because it's the deepest dimension and expression of personal freedom, forum internum, which goes also to forum externum, to religare, to connect and work with like-minded, is a litmus test of all human rights. It's a central human right, because if this is not respected, the others will not be respected. Freedom of opinion, of expression, of media, of assembly, of association, surely will not be respected. Therefore, religious freedom matters. It's central human right. And for democracy, human rights, human dignity, which is source of our rights and duties, rule of law, justice is a must. These are foundations of freedom and democracy. So I call on state authorities of Armenia to respect Armenian constitution, not Slovak, not German, Armenian constitution respected by Armenia, including and especially independence of Armenian Apostolic Church, to release prisoners of conscience. It's a shame in democratic country. Prisoners of conscience in democratic country is a shame for the government, for judiciary, for prosecution, for all holders of power. And I call on government to stop attacking church and church hierarchy led by Catholicos Karekin II. And secondly, I also want to call on respect of international commitments of the country. It's a member of the United Nations. There is Convention on Political and Civil Rights, Article 18 on religious freedom. It's OSCE participating country. with human rights as important pillar of the whole agreement. And then or newly, Armenia is partner of Eastern Partnership of the European Union since 2009. And last year, Armenian Parliament adopted EU integration law. So Armenia has ambition to become part of the club, where again, human rights and fundamental charter of human rights speak about the religious freedom for all. And thirdly, I also want to underline and call upon international institutions to guarantee and to help to monitor next elections in Armenia, to guarantee that they will be free and fair. This is primary responsibility of state power, to show that transition of power is part of the democratic culture and development. I call on Armenian people and friends to stay vigilant and loyal to values, faith, and conviction that help nation to navigate, struggle, and survive in complex history and in the Caucasus region. This remains source for future. Tradition, from Latin tradere, doesn't mean transfer of ashes. Tradition means to transfer faith, to transfer fire of our fathers and mothers. And that's the role of current generation in Armenia for tomorrow and for future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well, we've been blessed and honored by all of our speakers today, and I just want to say thank you so much for taking the great effort to be here today. Two of our participants flew across the pond from Europe to be with us today. That's how highly they cherished this moment and know how important this issue and all of these issues going on in Armenia are today. So I wanted to just thank you. Thank you for all of your efforts to be with us and to share with us. I wanted to mention one other thing on behalf of the National Democratic Alliance of Armenia, which is that the political repressions that you've been hearing about this afternoon, that we're speaking about, hit close to home, because for the members of the NDA, their own would-be candidate for president or for prime minister, Colonel Varuzan Avetisyan, is a prominent advocate for sovereignty and reform. He is a political prisoner in Armenia since 2022, and that's the second time, but he is still there. He's in Armenia, not a prisoner of war in Baku. He's imprisoned by Armenia at the request of the government. We've heard a lot here today, probably so much that it's hard to absorb everything. We will have a link that we will be able to send to those who've participated, who've given us their emails, and we will certainly send that around. I myself want to listen to it about 3 more times. But one of the things that we focused on the most here, which is so near and dear to the core of who we are as human people and our human dignity, is religious freedom. Because, as you've heard, religious freedom and human rights are foundational. And they are, in fact, the pillar of the United States foreign policy. Human rights, freedom of speech, democracy, and a flourishing economy do not exist without religious freedom. It is the foundation of any solid democracy. Where religious freedom is protected, communities can flourish, civil societies can strengthen, and the rule of law prevails. Without religious freedom, without the respect of the human person and the respect of everything that you believe, from A to Z, from atheist to Zoroastrianism, and everything in between. Without that respect, we have nothing. There is no guarantee for anything else. So we believe in finality here, we believe that if the trends that we have listened to today are left unchecked, they will threaten, most certainly, the stability, longevity, and the very existence of the world's first Christian nation. If you speak to men on the street in Armenia, if you understand what is going through the hearts and minds of those people who live there, as well as almost everyone I have encountered in the Armenian diaspora, they're concerned for the very existence of their country. And so for that, I just can't stop raising the alarm bells on this. And and on behalf of the National Democratic Alliance of Armenia, as well as Sovereign Global Solutions, we're grateful to have been able to be here today with you, for you to have taken your time to listen to these incredibly important presentations. And I would like to open it up for any questions that you may have of our panelists, of our expert speakers. It is not every day that you get access to these people and to their brilliance. And so I would like to open it up for anybody who would like to ask a question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Alex Sanchez. I'm an analyst based in DC. Without trying to get too political, Armenia is going to have elections in June, parliamentary elections. Is there any hope for a new party to democratically win the elections so that religious freedom will prevail once again in the country? Thank you.
Would anybody here like to take a stab at that? I would love to. Please do.
Of course, there's always a chance and always hope, but I've just come back from Armenia so long ago, and the big question is, can there be fair and free elections under these conditions? We've already heard about the nature of the regime, they're the government, but the European Union, for example, has backed, Pashinyan has pledged a minimum of 15 million euros to fight what they call Russian disinformation during the elections. The vice president has just endorsed the candidacy of the prime minister, and everybody sure in this room is aware that the United States has a long history of influencing elections here and there where they feel that they have a strategic interest in doing so. I personally am very skeptical that there will be fair and free elections under these conditions. One can always hope, but the outlook isn't really very good. This is a national security issue perceived by the government. Turkey, Azerbaijan see the prime minister as their man, and Washington and Brussels also see the prime minister as their man to deliver TRIP. That's where it really all boils down to, in my humble opinion. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Yeah.
Speakers had mentioned J.D. Vance's visit, and I had questions about that. Just like, what concerns do you have about the Trump administration's handling of the issue? What could they be doing better, and why do you think they've taken the response that they have to it?
I mean, it's just whoever.
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think there are two things at play. And this is the number one is something which is not unique to the Trump administration. Another one which is the one which is not unique to the Trump administration, which I was in the government, I was in the Foreign Service, and that is governments tend to focus on the practical. And so when you talk about things like the spiritual, or that's like fuzzy, like we're governments, we talk about economics, we talk about politics, we talk about building things, right? So this is an inherent flaw of this administration and all of administrations, and they tend to think of, let's build a bridge, or let's do this or do that. That's, I think, one problem. The other one, I think, is maybe more unique to this administration, which is the whole question of strategy, right? Of kind of looking at the world in a certain strategic way, so they see that things could be worse, right? Armenia could have been invaded last year. So they prevented that, right? They stopped that. We don't know fully, of course, what, how indebted Pashinyan is to Azerbaijan, how much under threat he is. Did the Azeris specifically say, you will break the church or else, right? We don't know that. But I think those two things, the governments just they just go take the easy way out. All governments do. And the other part is we have a lot of issues. We solve this issue. We have other issues to deal with. Let's move on to the next one.
Thank you so much. Yes. Yeah, we actually can't hear it. That doesn't actually elevate the sound of the voice.
Yeah.
It's for the live feed, but we're gonna give to the lady first and then to John Gazzi.
I'll try to speak as loud as possible. Hi, my name is Enia Way. I work with Representative Susie Lee out of Nevada. I'm curious just because in general, on the Hill, the conversation is often Armenia versus Azerbaijan, and that can lead to the assumption that obviously supporting Armenia through military, economic means will hopefully counter any national security and or defense concerns that may be had. However, obviously, as you all explained really well today, thinking about the actual human rights within the country is obviously important. And so how would you suggest policymakers should be thinking more critically about holding Armenia accountable while not maybe ceding support for Armenia in contrast to what's happening between Armenia and Azerbaijan?
That's
Thank
an
you.
excellent question. What kind of advice would you give to policymakers and the administration to basically bolster human rights?
Not only in this country, but also in Europe and generally democratic world, we hear a lot of talk about values. Values matter most. Let's start with the values, which means that whatever we can do in economic or political terms should be based on something deeper and deeply human. And when we look even to the post-war founding documents, they speak about peace, justice, and dignity as important preconditions for living together. And that's something what matters. And then stability and prosperity comes. It's not the opposite way around. And in connection to the previous or the first question on elections and new party or future winners, I would say what matters is a nation, people. If they don't sell their conscience, their future for money from whatever side, east or west or north and south, they have chance. If they sell it because money is more than freedom, dignity, or integrity, then they are losing already today, yesterday. Armenian nation was not eliminated from history because they had values, perseverance, courage, etc. These are really civilizational issues. And I can only express hope and also conviction that there are still many or majority who will not sell their future for whatever component of power, money or politics or influence. And this is also indirect answer to policymakers here in the US, in the world, in Europe, because what we nurture, then we harvest. If we care about values, we will see peaceful Europe. If not, we got another war. And one ethical dimension to this important question is that rate of our responsibility for what's going on there and there depends on the rate of our influence. United States, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, they have not only a say, they have very strong influence in Caucasus region. And therefore they have very strong responsibility. Temporary and transcendent. I mean it, especially in the country where they say they are devout Christians in power. This is something to be seen, not heard. It must be visible from impact, from deeds, from decisions, not from speeches. I hope I was understood. Thank you.
John Gizzi, you had a question?
I'd like to see if anybody would address the counter charge that comes from Armenia about their own people being persecuted in Azerbaijan. And I refer specifically to the Nagorno-Karabakh bombing, September of 2023, in which a primarily Armenian community in an area recognized by Azerbaijan were targeted by lightning bombings and fled to Armenia after. They charged that this was ethnic cleansing from the other side. And they say when they are accused of religious persecution at all, that the shoe was on the other foot in this bombing. And I hope I'm saying it right, Nagorno-Karabakh. Would anyone care to address that?
Do you understand?
I'm not quite sure exactly what
Okay.
they're talking about. The
Yeah,
ethnic
yeah.
cleansing of
I
Karabakh.
think, are you saying the question is your question that when Armenia's government is accused of persecuting their own Christians, they point to Baku and how Baku persecuted them as well, or the Christians in Nagorno-Karabakh? Yeah, 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 sure. I mean, they certainly did. I mean, but would you like to say something about that?
I'm not 100% sure exactly what the question is. I know it was happening in Nagorno-Karabakh during the 2023 war, the ethnic cleansing. So, okay, we know that there was a 9-month blockade, completely illegal, inhumane. The world stood on the sidelines, including the Armenian government at that time. So there was this blitzkrieg, and within a day or so, all of the population fled. The blockade came to an end. People were chased away. They live in Armenia as second-class citizens. Yes. They have big disabilities. The question is, are they Armenian citizens? Are they not citizens? What are their rights in Armenia? And they have a very difficult time. There's the rate of poverty is enormous amongst those that are displaced. And the Armenian government is afraid to engage with them. Their leadership is threatened. They're not allowed to function, to have a representation. And the Armenian government is concerned that Azerbaijan and Turkey will regard any support that they give to this community that goes beyond humanitarian aid as a violation of their understanding. The Armenian government is terrified of war coming from Azerbaijan and Turkey. And it makes concession after concession to Turkey and Azerbaijan in the hope, it's kind of appeasement, and the hope that they will not attack. So one of Azerbaijan's conditions is that the Karabakh issue is closed. I mentioned it's closed. Well, the church says it's not closed. The church says you can't close human rights. Human rights you can't close them. They're eternal. They're rights. And so the church has an obligation to stand in solidarity with those who have been displaced from Nagorno-Karabakh. And that is one of the big problems that the Pashinyan regime has. The last wave of persecution began immediately after a conference in Bern, Switzerland, sponsored by the World Council of Churches. It was called the Cultural Heritage Conference, about preserving the cultural heritage of Nagorno-Karabakh. And the Catholicos was there. He spoke, I heard him, and he spoke in defense of that population and spoke about ethno-religious cleansing. And this was taboo. This was taboo, and he continues to speak that way. Therefore, the state must suppress the church if it continues to stand in solidarity with these people and violate other conditions of peace. I don't know whether that answers your question, but that's my understanding of what has happened with Nagorno-Karabakh. It's a taboo issue, and Armenia will suffer terribly if it publicly raises the issue, because they have given undertakings to Azerbaijan and Turkey that it's closed, just as they've given undertakings that they will not, as a government, promote genocide recognition. That's another one of the concessions that is made. We don't know where these concessions will end, and we see no sign of the United States supporting Azerbaijan and Armenia and establishing red lines across which Azerbaijan and Turkey must not tread.
I would add to that that while we have the Trump administration, we do feel that Azerbaijan will be held at bay. I would say I think there's a good chance they will be held at bay from any sort of attack on Armenia. I think that we feel that we've heard that several times, that has been the case, and that intervention has helped keep Armenia safe. We are concerned, however, about any time in the future. So, having something in place would be great. Having some sort of a way to hold Azerbaijan accountable, and strict borders in place that are protected, and Azerbaijan outside of their military installations removed from inside of Armenia and taken outside. That would be great. So anyway, there's a lot of complicated scenarios that come into play here, but with that, I must say thank you so much for all of our incredible speakers and presenters, and for their participation in this day, and for everything that they've brought to the table today. So I would ask you to join me in thanking them. And they are still around here, so if you haven't gotten a chance to speak with them or ask them a question, I invite you to do so. Thank you so much for coming.